on, you'll want to turn, well, we're on. Welcome to Grace Gospel Fellowship, Sunday morning Bible study. This is where we the people seek to honor in God we trust. We do so this morning from the 12th chapter of Isaiah. It's one you can memorize. It's not very long. Please turn to Isaiah chapter 12. It has one of my favorite verses in it, verse 4. We can read the whole chapter, it's so short. And in that day thou shalt say, O Lord, I will praise thee. Though you were angry, your anger is turned away, and you comfort me. Behold, God is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid, for the Lord Jehovah is my strength and my song. He's also become my salvation. Therefore with joy shall you draw water out of the wells of salvation. And in that day shall you say, Praise the Lord, call upon his name, declare his doings among the people, make mention that his name is exalted. Lift him up and boast on his name of renown. Sing unto the Lord, for he hath done excellent things. This is known in all the earth. Cry and shout, you inhabitants of Zion, for great is the Holy One of Israel in the midst of thee. All right, I wanted to start there. We're going to turn to John chapter 12 now. And in a moment we'll begin that. I want to mention a couple things to you before we push off into the heart's desire. We have 3 copies of this book. It's called 40 Days for Life, written by a Catholic man, Sean Carney, fine, young, handsome Irishman with a great skill in oratory. We heard him last night at the Speak Out Illinois conference, which is a conference of over 30-some organizations that fight for life in the womb. And we come together once a year and have workshops on the fight for life, and Sean was the keynote speaker. Some of those workshops, by the way, you can order it if you weren't there yesterday. We had a great table, though. We had a great table of people yesterday. Some of those workshops included Obamacare and abortion. Abortion in the hard cases was one that I sadly missed. But it sounded excellent. There were a number of people there, including somebody who was the product of a rape, whose mother chose life. It was a beautiful, fascinating day, culminated by the keynote speech from Sean Carney. Sean Carney lives in Houston, and believe it or not, you might know this, but the Planned Parenthood Aurora, which I'll be at in 2 Saturdays as a sidewalk counselor. If any of you would want to join me, just contact me. But Planned Parenthood Aurora used to be the biggest Planned Parenthood abortuary in the country. It's since been superseded by Houston's Planned Parenthood, which is over 78,000 square feet. And that's the one where Sean often would be outside counseling and praying for those who were going in. Any of you know who Abby Johnson is? You heard the name Abby Johnson? Not many hands went up. That's okay, that's good. You're going to know her in a moment. We're going to show you a short clip of her testimony. Abby Johnson ran the biggest Planned Parenthood in the country for, I think it was around 9 years, until an event took place that changed everything. And you're going to see that event in just a moment. But I bring her up because Sean knew her. He knew her because he'd talked to her through the chain link fence as she'd go in, and he said, I must have seen her swipe her card to get into the building over 2,000 times. And oftentimes we'd talk through the fence, and some of the times it was cordial, and most of the time not so much. So as often happens, the people who work at these places resent the Christians who are outside, and they say nasty, nasty, filthy things. Mostly it's hand gestures and as such. But I want to share just 2 stories that Sean related to us at yesterday's event. But let's start with the film clip of Abby Johnson's testimony. I think you'll find it fascinating.
If places like Planned Parenthood weren't around, then abortion would be really unsafe, and we would just be sending women to places that would be unsafe, and they would be dying by the thousands. And Planned Parenthood's goal is about preventing abortion, and it's about making abortion safe and making it rare. And that really sounded about what I believed in. I looked at the ultrasound screen and I saw the whole profile of a baby on the screen. And I was pretty excited when I went in the room, and as soon as I saw that baby on the screen, that excitement kind of left. I suddenly felt pretty anxious and was thinking that this could be a really horrible image. The cannula made its way to the baby and started poking the baby in the side. And, you know, the baby wasn't moving. And I thought, okay, well, of course not. Of course it's not moving, because babies at this stage don't feel anything. That's what I tell women all the time. When they ask me if my baby's going to feel pain or feel anything, I tell them no. All of a sudden, the baby woke up. It seemed to just wake up, and the baby started moving, and the arms and legs started moving, and it appeared that the baby was trying to move away from the cannula. And I couldn't believe what I was watching. And then the doctor had to keep moving the cannula closer to the baby because it was making progress, moving away. The last thing that I saw on the screen was this perfect little backbone of the baby. And on an ultrasound, the backbone is really bright white. And that was the very last thing that I saw twist and go into the tube. We finished up the day. I went home. I called my friend Laura, who had also worked at the Bryan Clinic with me and was no longer working at Planned Parenthood anymore, and told her about what I had witnessed. And she, when I started describing it, she had never seen anything like that either. She made me stop, and she just said, I can't listen to any more. Then I started thinking about all the women I had lied to, unintentionally, but you know, Planned Parenthood had told me that their baby's not going to feel any of that, and their baby's not going to feel any pain, and so when the women asked me that, and they asked me that all the time, I mean, women asked me that probably hundreds of times, and every time I would just immediately answer, no, absolutely not, because that's what Planned Parenthood had told me to say, and that's what I believed. And I just thought, what if these women had known the truth? You know, would they have made that choice? They asked the question because it mattered to them, and I had just given them a lie. Monday I went back to work, and I was just hating it. I was just dreading it. And we were doing medication abortions that day. And I was sitting in my office, and I was looking at these women coming in and out of the clinic, and they were walking to their car, and they were holding these brown bags. And I knew that in the bag was the medication abortion pills, the regimen. And I just sat there and I was thinking, I'm still doing it. I just started to cry, and I just thought, where am I going to go? Because, you know, all of my so-called friends were either working at Planned Parenthood or affiliated with Planned Parenthood in some way. I looked out the window and I saw these two women praying outside of the clinic. And I felt like God was telling me to go. You know, the day that I saw the abortion procedure, I didn't know that I would one day be here. I didn't know that I would be working in the pro-life movement. Because I wasn't angry. I wasn't disgruntled. I just didn't want to work at Planned Parenthood anymore. I just didn't want to take part in any more abortions. I didn't want my hands to be involved in that work anymore. And, you know, God had different plans. And, you know, I heard somebody say one time, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. And that's definitely been the situation for me through all of this. I wasn't ever sure that I would feel comfortable going and praying out in front of the clinic that I ran. I didn't know how uncomfortable that would feel. I know it works. And, you know, I didn't leave because I wanted attention. I left because I was following God's will. And, you know, every time you're out there in front of the clinic, it is stirring up the conscience of the men and women going in, and it's stirring up the conscience of the clinic workers who are there. Every time you're out there, people are watching what you're doing. People are watching you pray. I've gotten several calls from other Planned Parenthood directors and other Planned Parenthood workers who have left the abortion industry because they felt like God was calling them out. And, you know, they haven't gone public like I have, but they left, and now they're reaching out to me because they want to talk to somebody about it. They want to talk to, you know, the things that they witnessed. And so you never know how much impact the work that you're doing will have on another person. And so that's why we just have to, you know, keep up what we're doing, and we have to be willing to say to Planned Parenthood and those that support Planned Parenthood, as long as you are there, as long as your doors are open, as long as you are continuing to provide abortions, we will be there. And not that we're going to be there fighting you, but we're going to be there bringing hope to the people that work in that center, and we're going to be there to bring hope to the men and women going in there who feel like they have no hope. We're going to be there to bring them hope.
Thank you. I posted this yesterday, and some of you might want to share it. I posted a different interview yesterday where Abby was interviewed by Mike Huckabee, a little bit shorter version because, you know, on the internet, people don't normally have an attention span that's very long. And after describing Abby's testimony, you know, it wasn't until she saw that ultrasound-assisted abortion where she saw a little 13-week-old girl fight for her life and lose that she changed her mind. And so I put the following. I said, now I know that some of you reading this are feeling uncomfortable right now, and I understand that you probably won't watch a short interview where she tells her story, but I just want to ask you one question. How do you dismiss the fact that the co-founder of NARAL, Jane Roe, Mary Doe, and the coordinator of America's largest abortuary all abandoned their pro-choice position and chose life? How do you dismiss the lives and testimonies of Bernard Nathanson, Norma McCorvey, Sandra Cano, and Abby Johnson? Is your curiosity not piqued? Is your conscience not bothered that a man who was involved with 75,000 abortions, including 2 of his own children, changed his mind? And the figureheads of Roe versus Wade and Doe versus Bolton are, as I write this, ardent pro-life activists. I suspect that you're an honest person, and I suspect that the next time you post something about the unfortunate treatment of dogs or eagle's eggs, you'll think about a 13-week-old fetus trying to dodge a doctor's probe and ask yourself, why are you pro-life when it comes to every other situation than that of life in the womb? I added this morning, and maybe if I'm wrong you can correct me, but I've never met nor have I heard of someone who was a nationally known pro-life activist who repented and went into the abortion industry. If they did, I guarantee you, if Sarah Palin came out tomorrow as pro-abortion, she'd be the left's Woman of the Year. I share that with you because Sean was one of those people outside, those girls that were praying that she mentioned were part of his pro-life group that prayed often outside of there. And she actually did join them, and she was crying and asking for forgiveness, amazingly. In his book, 40 Days for Life, he tells a number of great stories. You may want to pick this up. But one of the stories he tells, other than the story about Abby, is a story about a woman. She's a grandmother. She lives in Montana, and she runs a pro-life vigil outside of an abortion clinic every Saturday, I think it is. And she's been doing it for 6 years, and she's done the 40 Days for Life for 6 years, which is 40 days during the time of the year where people pray around the clock outside of an abortion clinic. And she was a little bit depressed because in those 6 years, not one woman had changed their mind as they walked into the abortion clinic. And she had no success stories to feed her. She was just showing up, and she had been very depressed, and she shared this with people she had worked with. And so Sean knew the story. But she got a call one day when she wasn't there. Some of her people were there, and she got a call, and the young girl who was there said, "Good news. For the first time today, a woman changed her mind." She went into the clinic, and a few minutes later, she walked out, crying, got into her car, and left. And so for the first time in 6 years, this grandmother felt that she finally had a taste of something that she could offer up to God other than what she felt was personal failure. And she was in the joy of a moment when about an hour later, she received a call from her own daughter. And her daughter said, "Mom, your granddaughter had an abortion today." So just in 60 minutes' time, she went from elated to completely destroyed because her granddaughter had chosen death that morning. And she was in prayer, and she was weeping when the phone rang again a little while later in the day. It was her daughter again correcting the story. It turns out that that girl who had walked into the clinic and changed her mind was her own granddaughter. In 6 years' time, the only baby she had saved was her great-grandson. He's 3 years old now. So I want to speak to you this morning about our heart's desire. And this comes out of, what is your heart's desire? If I asked you that question, and in the privacy of your mind, if I said, "Can you please write it down for me now?" How long would it take before you put pen to paper? How long would it take before pen began to move? And this happens all the time with kids. You know, you say, if a genie appears out of nowhere and gives you 3 wishes, what would those wishes be? Well, if you only have 3, you're really going to want to think about it. You don't want to screw it up, right? If I asked you, what is your heart's desire this morning, and you don't have to answer me verbally, answer yourself in your own mind, and be honest. What is your heart's desire? What would you write down? And would it fill up a page, or would it be one magnificent sentence? How long would it take you to figure it out? I ask you this because I think it's crucial. I think it's crucial that this should be something that we're able to answer immediately. And I'm going to suggest to you that if it's a tough thing, if it's something we're not really sure about, if we have to have an intellectual tug of war with ourselves to kind of figure it out and think, well, maybe that one's a little bit too selfish and maybe this one is, what is your heart's desire? Now, my heart's desire has changed. It's different when you're single. It's different when you're not a parent. It's different when you're not a pastor. My heart's desire used to be motorcycles and the Dallas Cowboys and maybe a girl to go on the back of the motorcycle, but thank God that's changed. I still want the motorcycle, honey, but yeah, I got the girl. Yeah. She won't sit on the back of it. That's the problem, Bill. Well, we'll be driving and I'll see a guy on a Honda Goldwing and his woman's on the back and they're just complete sheer and utter joy. You can't wipe the smiles off their face. And I'll say, look at that, honey, that could be us when we retire. I don't want to tell you what she says. Yeah. How did we get to that? Your heart's desire. Would you know what to write? Does it come to you? I bring this up to you because the other day, in a conversation, somebody had said something very, very wise and biblical, and I think she was proud about it. I think she put it down because I think it was something that culminated after, many years of thinking about it and just being able not to articulate it, and she finally articulated it and she put it down. I think she's proud of it because we don't put things down we're not proud about. And she put it down, and then she got some flack from friends and other Christians saying, oh, no, this isn't true. This isn't true, that God will give riches to those believers. They started preaching the prosperity gospel to her, and they used a verse. I want to share that verse with you, and we're going to talk about the heart's desire today. They used a very famous verse that many people use, and I should say many people misuse. Psalm 37:4. Have you heard it? Delight yourself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. Delight yourself also in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of your heart. You see, if you take this verse by itself, and you take it out of context, remember David's the one who's penned it, but you take it out of context, what this is, I should have brought my genie bottle. I have a genie bottle, it's beautiful. It's hand carved. My brother sent it to me from Africa. This old Arab gentleman in his 80s hand carves this out of copper, and it's beautiful. But this is the genie bottle for the Christians who believe in the prosperity gospel. This is the rub the bottle and get what you desire verse that the prosperity gospel people use to suggest that God's just waiting there for the right incantation. We call it prayer. For the right incantation, which is spelled to draw from him prosperity. And that's exactly how this woman was rebutted with this verse. No, see, God does want us to have the Escalade. My interpretation of their sentiment. Psalm of David, fret not yourself because of evildoers, neither be you envious against the workers of iniquity, for they shall soon be cut down like the grass and wither as the green herb. Trust in the Lord and do good, so shalt thou dwell in the land, and verily thou shalt be fed. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of your heart. The next verse goes on to say, commit thy way unto the Lord, trust in him, and he shall bring it to pass. So we have commit, we have trust, we have delight. Now, if that is true of you, I'm going to tell you, you will receive the desires of your heart. If this is truly sincere and not just a prayer of Jabez, bovine scatology, modern Christianity, witchcraft. But first, let's talk about the desires of the heart, shall we? This is going to be a dangerous journey for some of you, because the majority of people who have grown up in our era see Jesus in that way. They see God in that way. Our parents grew up in an era where they saw God as like the church lady. You know, what my father used to say, the heavenly earthquake Magoon, somebody was out to get you, you know, if you didn't toe the line, you know. I forgot the gentleman who wrote it. He said, but we've gone from the church lady perception of God and Christianity to the Stuart Smalley perception of him, you know, where we could stare into the mirror and God really wants all of us to have a win-win because we're so likable and so forth. Now here, John chapter 12. Can I bring you to John chapter 12? Powerful, powerful chapter. Lots happening here. I'd like to start at the start of this chapter because it contains in something many people don't realize. Let me just take a second to share this with you. I remember John 12 for the most probably insignificant verse in the chapter, but it's the most powerful to me because most people overlook it, and that's the mention of Lazarus. You know, this is after God has raised Lazarus up, you know, and Luke has this great account of a different Lazarus, you know, the old man and Lazarus, and it's not, it doesn't say it's a parable. People like to say it's a parable. It doesn't say, you know, when Christ is very forthright when he says this is a parable or you have heard the parable. This he tells as a story, but not a parable. But he talks about the rich man and Lazarus, and the rich man, you know, is on the wrong side of Hades, awaiting judgment, and what we'd consider the county jail, not in prison yet, but he's on the wrong side of Hades. This is before Christ has risen and led captivity captive and brought believers up into the presence of God in heaven. But so there's Abraham's bosom and this story of this man named Lazarus who was a beggar all his life. He was poor, he was poverty-stricken, he never had anything, and he lived homeless outside the gate of a very rich man, big family, very profound. This rich man never had known want in his life, always had the best of things, but he died unsaved, and Lazarus was saved. And the angels, it says, of Lazarus escorted him up into Abraham's bosom, and there he was with Abraham. And the rich man comes and begs him for a drink of water, shows their physical discomfort, but beyond that, after he thinks of himself and his own personal discomfort, he thinks of his unsaved family. And he begs Abraham, can you please send somebody back to tell them. You know, tell them. Because if you do, they'll listen. Send Lazarus. They know him. Send Lazarus back. They'll listen to Lazarus. And Abraham's response is rather profound. People are always asking for a greater miracle than the miracle that God has already done. I had a friend who say, if God would just do something today, you know, like turn the sky a really weird color or something, just so we know he really exists. As if he hasn't done something 1,000 times more impressive than that, you know. He says, send Lazarus back. They'll listen to him. They'll listen to somebody who's come back from the dead. And Abraham says, look, they've got Moses and the prophets. They've got Moses and the prophets. They've got a nuclear bomb, and you want me to send back a BB gun. And if they don't believe Moses and the prophets and all the proofs contained in the Word of God, they're not going to believe somebody even if he's been raised from the dead. Now, here's the irony. Those stories people don't normally put together. Luke 16 and this story in John chapter 12, where Jesus actually did raise up a Lazarus. He raised Lazarus. He brought him back. And what was the response of the unbelievers? Did they listen? Were they amazed? Were they wowed? Did they repent? Did they change their minds? Did they say, this is a sign, he must be the Messiah? No. That was the last straw. That's when they said, go get Judas, we got to kill him now. And not only did they say, we got to kill the Christ. This is very Chicago in a way, very Chicago. They said they got to get rid of the evidence too. They didn't only put out a hit on Jesus Christ, they put out a hit on Lazarus. It's here. Look. Never forget this verse, verse 10. But the chief priests consulted that they might put also Lazarus to death. This verse was the inspiration of a great play. It doesn't happen much. You'd have to download it from online to read it, but a great play called Lazarus Laughed. You know, the idea that these fools would come forward to kill him and it would scare him. Been there, done that, dude. So we're not in that part of the chapter, though, but it's a phenomenal thing to remember. The story, the answer to Luke 16, actually played out in real life because Jesus raised up a Lazarus and they sought to kill him and get rid of the evidence. Well, you get down and Jesus Christ is preaching. We're gonna go all the way down for our subject today to verse 40. But I want to set the tone, so we're going to begin in verse 23 when Jesus is telling them, look, about his impending death. He says, the hour has come that the Son of Man should be glorified. Now, throughout their time with Christ, over and over he'd say, this is not my hour. This is not my hour. You know, people would pick up stones or they would rush into the crowd to try and seize him. And he'd say, well, this is not my hour. And he'd disappear. He'd get away. And now they've heard that time and again. This is the first time they heard, yeah, the time is here. This is my hour. Hours come that the Son of Man should be glorified. Truly, truly, I say unto you, except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abides alone. But if it dies, it brings forth much fruit. Harvest. He that loves his life shall lose it, and he that hates his life in this world shall keep it unto life eternal. If any man serve me, let him follow me, and where I am, there shall also my servant be. If any man serve me, him will my Father honor. Very important verse, verse 26, to keep in mind when you're reading or when you're hearing somebody tell you that Psalm 37 is the magic incantation to get the blessing of God. Jesus Christ here is describing true discipleship. True discipleship, by the way, he describes discipleship in vivid language in the New Testament. And it doesn't end with escalades and apple vacations. If any man serve me, let him follow me, and where I am, there shall also my servant be. See, this is the man that's committed, that desires, that we heard about in Psalm 37, right? Now is my soul troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me for this hour? But for this very reason came I unto this hour. Father, glorify thy name. Then came there a voice from heaven saying, I both glorified it and will glorify it again. The people, therefore, that stood by and heard it said that it thundered. Others said an angel spoke it to him. And Jesus answered and said, this voice came not because of me, but for your sakes. This is something Christ used often in his teaching. He prays outside of the tomb of Lazarus and he says, Father, I don't pray openly, for me. I know this. I know you can do this. I'm praying it for the audience. Same thing here. He says, this isn't for me. I knew this is true. Now here it is. Now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the prince of this world be cast out. And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto me. This he said, signifying what death he should die. I want to stop here for a moment. That verse is a lot more troubling than you think. Because when John says this is signifying the death he must die, we really stop at the idea that it's just a foreshadowing of he's talking about the cross, right? He'll be lifted up like the bronze serpent. He'll be put on a tree and crucified. And we look at that, and that's a good thing. For us, that's our redemption. We neglect to understand the second half of that statement. And I will be lifted up, right? Are you there? And will draw all men unto me. Now, that's blessing and cursing. And will draw all men unto me. For years I used to thought that there was only one road that led to God. Then I heard Oprah say that many roads lead to God, and it got me thinking. And then I sat under a man give a sermon, and he had the audacity to go beyond Oprah. And that's pretty audacious, because this woman has a magazine that's got a different visage of her on every magazine cover. So it's audacious to go beyond Oprah. But here he goes. He said, he just didn't say many paths lead to God. He said all paths lead to God. And do you know what? He was right. All paths do lead to God. He was right because he qualified that statement with the following: all paths lead to God, but there's only one that doesn't end in judgment. And that's Jesus Christ. It's true. It's biblical. All paths do lead to God. Everyone will stand in front of him. You really don't want to be in front of the white throne where, all the roads pour out, because there's only one road that leads away from the white throne. And if I be lifted up from the earth, I will draw all men unto me. You see, this is the critical moment of history, the great questions that you can ask. I asked you a tough question this morning. What is your heart's desire? The great questions in the world to answer is, what make you of Jesus Christ? If you haven't answered that question, or if you have answered it wrongly and not given an answer, as Rush would say, is an answer in itself, but that is the most important question for the individual. His crucifixion is the pinnacle of history. How do you see it? You see it as human tragedy. You see it as a martyrdom. You see it as the corn that goes into the ground and dies. How do you see it? I guess some see it as a combination to open God's secret safe and, get away with the golden goose. The people answered, said, we've heard out of the law that Christ abides forever, and how you say then that the Son of Man must be lifted up. Who is this Son of Man? Jesus said unto them, yet a little while is the light with you. Walk while you have the light, lest darkness come upon you. For he that walks in darkness knows not whither he goeth. While you have the light, believe in the light, that you may be the children of the light. And these things spake Jesus, and departed, and did hide himself from them. But though he had done so many miracles before them, yet they believed not on him. See, it's not about miracles. You have people in your life. Do you have people in your life who refuse to see reason or logic. We call it cognitive dissonance. Well, actually, we don't call it that. The psychologist calls it that. Cognitive dissonance. To reject, even though there's plain evidence in front of your face, to reject the idea wholeheartedly. You meet people like that every day who allow emotion to trump plain reason. Keep going. Are you ready? But though he had done so many miracles before them, yet they believed not on him. That this is the chapter that talks about Lazarus. They're going to kill Lazarus, for heaven's sake. There were witnesses that Lazarus stunk. He'd been in there more than 3 days. They were his family and friends and didn't want to push the rock away. The chief priests didn't think it was a trick. They knew it was a miracle. They didn't dismiss the miracle. They didn't, they didn't subsidize a Penn Jillette thing on how it was a hoax. Here we go. That the saying of Isaiah the prophet might be filled full, which he spoke, Lord, who hath believed our report, and to whom hath the arm of the Lord been revealed? Now, the arm of the Lord is the strength of God. Salvation is a depiction of his strength. He says this over and over to the Exodus generation. I who brought you out of Egypt with a strong arm. God likes to show his biceps off. And Isaiah predicted this. Who hath believed our report? The answer is not many. You get the 10%, the idea of around 10%. I'm not saying only 10% will be saved. I'm just saying that number keeps getting flown in your face. You know, the 10 lepers that were healed, only one came back. One came back. I used to blame them. I used to say, how ungrateful. And then I thought to myself, if I had leprosy, if I had this debilitating disease that had kept me from my wife and my children and my loved ones and my friends, and all of a sudden I was made whole, and I didn't have to walk on the opposite side of the street, and I didn't have to cover myself and say unclean when somebody was in danger and coming into contact with me, I think I would have done a sprint to my home and grabbed my wife and kissed her for the first time in 5 years. I mean, I do understand, but you know what? I would like to believe that first I would have turned around and hugged the man who saved me. But anyway, we have Christians today that think everyone makes the Rob Bell doctrine. Everyone's going to make heaven because God is a God of love. He is a God of love. He's also a God of wrath and justice and righteousness. Now, notice this next verse, that the saying of Isaiah the prophet might be fulfilled, which he spoke, Lord, who hath believed our report? Not many. And to whom hath the arm of the Lord been revealed? A very few. Therefore they could not believe, because Isaiah said again, he hath blinded their eyes. I have a problem with the word he there. It's not there. It could mean it hath blinded their eyes, their unbelief, their hard heart. Well, we'll look at it in Isaiah where it comes up. It hath blinded their eyes. Here's what it actually says. Therefore they could not believe, because, as Isaiah said again, their eyes be blind, their heart be hardened, that they should not see with eyes, nor understand with heart, and be converted, and I should heal them. Because you get the question, if it's a he hath blinded their eyes. You say, well, who hath blinded their eyes? Is it God? Well, if you're a Calvinist, you really like this passage because you think it's God the Father. But the problem is, you get into Paul, and Paul says it's Satan that's blinded the unsaved. So is it God or Satan, or is it both? Did they both do it? I'm not going to give you that answer today. We'll keep moving. I'll tell you, it's not as hard as you think. These things said Isaiah when he saw his glory and spoke of him. Nevertheless, among the chief rulers also many believed on him. Oh, this is a sad verse. Nevertheless, among the chief rulers, also many believed on him. Stop here. We know two of them. We know who two of them are. Do you? Nicodemus? Who was the other one? Ted's not here today. Anyone know who the other one was? Yes. Joseph and Nicodemus were chief rulers in the synagogue. They were on the 70. They were Sanhedrin. And they swallowed their tongues. But this says many. Many. Once in a while I'll go to a convention or a party hall or a Tea Party meeting and I'm treated to, I'm not into the rah-rah stuff. I really, can I say something to you real quick? This will give you a little bit of hope, but let me say something. Out of the people who have the capacity to vote in America, right? You have the capacity to vote once you're 18, if you're a citizen. Out of the people who have the capacity to vote in America, only half of them are registered voters, 50%. In a non-presidential year, out of those 50% of American voters, only 50% show up to the polls. You got me? Half, and then another half. Are you cool with that? 50%. So now we're down to 25%, right? That means for you and I to change America, we need 12.5% plus 1 to think the way we do. 12.5% plus 1 direct America's steps. Now that's kind of good news. But you hear this rah-rah about how the conservatives are in the majority in this country. And it's a majority Christian country. And then you see 56 million dead babies. You see the ravages of an anti-God philosophy in our country. Everywhere. The landscape is completely burning to the ground. And you say, really? We're a majority Christian country and there are 40% people say they're conservative and only 20% say they're liberal? How is this possible? Because I'm seeing the consequences of this great Christian conservative country, and it doesn't look very good. Are the pollsters wrong? Well, listen, majority-minority matters very little bit. The sheep are a majority in a sheepfold. The minority keeps their butt in line because it's got teeth and a stick. The prisoners are a majority in a prison. The minority keeps their butt in line because they have bars and guns. They've given me my lights, and we're still in John chapter 12. Come back for the third session. We'll talk about the desire of your heart. You're going to see some beautiful things in the person of Paul and Christ. If you stay for the third session, we'll call Bill up to the stage to give us some announcements. And remember, if you...